Hello, everybody. Welcome to our latest PSDI webinar. I'm Dr. Samantha Pearman-Kanza, so filling in for Dr. Nicola Knight as she is away on important PSDI business. So today we're really lucky to have the wonderful Caris Willoughby with us. So Caris is one of our PSDI Senior Research Fellows. She's been working with the University of Southampton for the last 20 years after working as a usability expert for IBM. And she's involved in a variety of projects looking at supporting researchers in the physical sciences. And one of the key parts of her work is on user experience and usability, which is what she's going to talk to you about today. So over to you, Caris.
Thank you, Sally. Hello, everybody. I'm going to talk to you about usability. But before I get to that, I'm going to talk to you about what usability isn't. So it's quite a common assumption or mistake that people make to think that graphic design and usability are the same thing, and they're definitely not. And quite often it's the case actually that things that do well, they sort of win awards for their graphic design are actually terrible on the usability front. So an example here is a website. So this is quite an old one, but it won some awards from Toyota about their features. And it's very pretty. It does lots of things. There's music, things move around. The problem is that it has a lot of usability problems. It's not possible to work out how to use it. You have to move your mouse over. And when you do, some little arrows come up and you can click on the arrows and things happen, but there's no consistency over what happens. Sometimes something pops up on the screen. Other times it takes you to a different page. The website itself took over 50 seconds to load. There was some research that was done quite a long time now that said if your website doesn't load in 4 seconds, then your users will just go away. They won't come back. And actually, in reality, it's considerably less than that now. If it's a commercial website, an organization, they're looking to make the website load in under a second. So no one's going to sit here for 50 seconds waiting for this, no matter how pretty it is. So graphic design can be important in usability. So it can make things clearer for users. It can make it easier for users to understand, but of itself, it is not usability. If you want to look for some really terrible examples of usability on website, I recommend looking up the Wix top 30 websites. There's lots of interesting graphical things in there, but it's not very usable at all. Usability also is not just about websites. So talk about usability, quite often people are thinking about websites, but it also applies to desktop software that's on the mobile phone. Even command line interfaces have ways that they can be made more usable. And it also applies to physical objects as well. So things like cars, 3D printer, and also teapots, as we'll get onto a bit later. Okay, so what is usability about? It's about understanding people's goals. So this XKCD cartoon is quite a good example of this. So on the left, things that people are going to a website to look for. So things that people put on a website that they think people want, and whereas in reality, people are actually looking for the things on the right, and there's not necessarily a lot of overlap. I can certainly agree for this because whenever I go to our university website, I'm inevitably looking for the campus address. So what is usability? So the definition of usability, extent to which a product can be used by specified users to achieve specified goals with effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction in a specified context of use. So what we're talking about here is those goals. People have something they're trying to accomplish, and whether they are able to accomplish that. So effectiveness, are they able to accomplish that easily? Are they able to do it without making lots of mistakes? Efficiency, are they able to do it quickly? And satisfaction, are they content with it? Is it frustrating, or are they happy, comfortable, they understand what they're doing? And the specified context of use. So this means in a particular situation. So for example, if I wanted to look up a bus timetable, it might be great if I'm looking on my laptop at home and it's a PDF, but if I'm trying to use that on my phone while I'm actually out trying to catch the bus, that's not usable. So what that means is, can a user easily use the product for the goals they want to achieve without being shown how? It needs to be easy for them to understand and achieve without direction. So affordance is a term you might have come across. This is a property that makes it clear how something can be used or how it should be used. So we have some examples of bad affordance and good affordance. So on the left, we have these teapots. Now the handle, that's sort of got good affordance. You hold on to it, it's clear what you've got to do. Those spouts, it's not clear at all what to do with those, quite distressing. On the right hand side, this is GarageBand. If I want to make a drum beat, it's really clear what I need to do here. So it's using the metaphor of the drum kit. I can tap on those things and it's obvious to me what's going to happen. So it has good affordance. So why is usability important? So for the first part, for the users, something that's easy to use, something that's usable means people can get things done more easily, they can do it quickly, they can be more productive. It saves time on training. So if something is well designed, it's clear how to use it, you don't need to go through a learning curve to get there. This is good. So happy users want to come back, they want to use whatever it is you've provided to them again, come back to your customers. They also will recommend it, give you high ratings, all of those kinds of things. But usability is also important in terms of business. If you think about usability up front, it's much cheaper than trying to fix problems later on. And it also saves businesses money. So making sure that the usability is there, you think about what users are trying to do, will save you money and be a lot less expensive than trying to fix big problems later. So it's all about understanding your users. So users have different goals, things they're trying to achieve, they're working in different environments, but they also have different needs, knowledge, expectations, and ability. So users are very diverse. So we're going to focus first of all on ability. So particularly when we think about ability, we're thinking about users that might have disabilities or impairments that make it hard for them to use a particular tool that you're providing. But it's not just about users with permanent disabilities in the way you might think of them, but there are also ways that you can have temporary disabilities or situational disabilities. So disability, why do we care about these people? Well, there are a very large number of people. It's estimated to be 1.3 billion people in the world actually have a permanent disability. And that's 1 in 6 people. Also, there's the consequences of an aging population. So as disability, as the chart shows there in the UK, as people get older, there's more and more that they're affected by disabilities. So the things we tend to think about with disabilities are kind of mobility problems, cognitive problems, hearing problems, and sight-related problems. And I'll talk a bit more about each of those. There are also temporary and situational disabilities. So temporary disabilities are, I've broken my leg, I've broken my arm, perhaps I've forgotten my glasses and I can't see the screen properly today. Those are situational, these are temporary kind of disability ones. But there's also situational disabilities. So for example, if you're working in a very loud environment, you won't be able to understand any technology that is trying to communicate to you using sound. If you're in a library, the same situation applies. You can't turn your speakers up so you can hear the sound that's being made. There are also, you might have mobility issues related to the fact that you've got gloves on. So if you're in the lab and you're trying to, you're handling some chemicals, it's also difficult to then try to handle a mouse or a keyboard at the same time. If you're holding some groceries, then it could be quite difficult to do something with just one arm, for example. And there's also, if you happen to have less knowledge, so it could be that you're new to a tool that you're trying to use, or for example, you're trying to use something in a different language. So if you're perhaps in a different country trying to use a piece of software where the keyboard may have keys in different places than you expect, or you may not understand the text that's on the screen. So there are a variety of ways in which these different disabilities or issues can affect all of us at any point in time. So disability can affect us all. Talking about usability and accessibility to people is something that I've been doing for a very long time. And I've been doing it for about 8 years and not really understanding what cognitive disabilities were. And then in 2015, I had an accident on my bicycle during a time trial and landed on my head and found out firsthand exactly what cognitive disabilities are all about. So disability can affect us all. Head injuries happen a lot. So yeah, if you want to read any more about that experience, then you can find out about that here. So what is accessibility? So we want to make sure that everything is usable for everybody. And the idea of accessibility is that we're actively trying to make sure that the things that we develop and create can be used by everybody, even if they have a disability. So they shouldn't be at a disadvantage. Assistive technology is technology that helps people with those different impairments to be able to have the capabilities of somebody that doesn't have the disabilities. So an example looking about how you design things for accessibility is, so we have here a YouTube video. If there's a blind user, what you want to do is to make sure that there's ways that you can navigate around this with a keyboard. It's not very much good to them if there isn't any audio content, because they won't be able to see what's going on the screen. And also it's important that the controls can be used with a screen reader. So a screen reader is a piece of assistive technology that's used to read out the different things that are on a screen, including the various controls and buttons and so on, and helps with navigation. If a user has a hearing impairment, then you want to make sure that there are captions or transcripts in the video so that somebody can access that content in the same way and get access to the same information. For somebody with a cognitive problem, then you want to minimize the amount of complicated jargon that might be in the video and make sure that the controls are easy to understand. I have to say the YouTube controls here are not very easy to understand. They could be better. Okay, so how do we go about designing for lots of different people? Okay, so we'll have a little look at different impairments and how we might change things to make those better for people. So when we think about mobility problems, sort of typically think about people's ability to move with their legs or not. But when it comes to using software and computers, it's very much focused around what we do with our hands, how we use a mouse to access various different things. So particular issues that somebody with a mobility issue in this way, for example, if somebody has arthritis in the hands, for example, they may not be able to easily use fine control with the mouse, and therefore we need to have sort of bigger input, so bigger buttons, more space between them. So in this example here, it's a mobile application that I think was originally designed to be on an iPad, but it's also available on the phone, and it's a very cluttered interface. The buttons are very small and it's really difficult for somebody to move around. So this is not accessible to somebody with that kind of a problem. So for cognitive kind of issues, so the kinds people that might have, that you'd consider would have cognitive issues are, for example, people with dyslexia, learning difficulties, brain injury, or autism, dyscalculia, dementia. So although these the causes of these different cognitive issues are very different to each other, there are actually similarities between the kinds of problems that it creates for people. So they have problems with processing information, they become very easily overwhelmed, they might struggle with complex language and need more white space, prefer pictures rather than words, and quite often have memory problems, so they might find it very difficult to hold on to information as they move around screens. So reducing the complexity, increasing white space and simplifying language is very helpful. In the image there, it's showing that there are some phones that you can get that have a much more simplified interface, so they use easy language. It makes it very easy. They don't have to navigate to different applications to do things. They can do it all from one place. So for people with hearing impairments, obviously it's important not to rely on sound. So sound is not used so often in software, but it is used in quite a lot of different contexts. So in the examples here, a fire alarm, it's not any good if it's just sound-based. The flashing light can help. and you have alarm clocks that use the same kind of principles. So they do make sound, but they also flash lights, and they have a vibrating pillow. In various software, it's for example, a lot of cars, the software that's used on those now is sends out lots of different sounds as alarms, and that's of no help at all to somebody who has hearing related problems. They're not going to be able to hear any of the sounds. There needs to be an alternative way of getting access to that information. So visual problems are very wide ranging. So it goes from sort of an impairment of the ability to see, such that just making things bigger can help, like the I've forgotten my glasses problem. We all tend to develop these problems as we get older, through to blindness. But there are also issues like colour blindness, which most things can be seen clearly, but colours cannot. So it's important not to communicate in that way. So examples on here are showing the use of sort of poor contrast. So if you have reduced eyesight, it's much harder to distinguish between different colours. So this example on the left, and the one in the middle here is using colour, but for no apparent reason. It seems very arbitrary, and it's communicating something, but it's difficult to know what, and it wouldn't help somebody that's colourblind. The example on the right with the stock application here is using colour to communicate things. It's quite effective if you can see those colours, but it also has the alternate plus and minus if you can't see those things. So as I say, vision is something that tends to degrade as you get older. So one of the things that goes is your ability to be able to perceive differences between colours. Things that are reduced contrast are harder to see. So in this example, there's on the left a simulation of a young user who's got excellent vision. They can see the differences between all of those colours. On the right hand side is a simulation of somebody who's older, who's lost some of that colour vision. And you can see that the titles there do not have, you can't see them as clearly, you can't see the content as clearly. So there are tools out there to help, particularly with these colour blindness issues and contrast issues. So this example is from Adobe. This is free for anybody to use. And it's got two aspects. The first one is this colour blindness. So it shows a simulation of the 3 types of colour blindness, and you can choose colours for your particular tool that you want to create, or your website, your styling, branding, and it will show you whether they're safe or not. So in this example, you can see that there are a variety of these where if you're colorblind, you wouldn't be able to distinguish between them, despite the fact with normal color sight, they are very different to each other. And you can change these around until it shows you that there isn't a conflict, and you can see just how different the contrast between the colors is. And the other tool is also from Adobe, and this is a contrast checker. So you notice at the top there's the WCAG 2.1 level. So this is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and these are standards for websites, and they dictate what you should do in order to make your websites accessible. And there are different levels of those. There's AA and there's AAA, and the minimum anybody should be aiming at is AAA. So you can see this example here. It's quite hard to read if you have ordinary eyesight, and it's completely impossible if you have a reduced eyesight. But what the tool does is it lets you compare the different colours, but it also makes suggestions about how you can choose similar colours that have a better contrast ratio. That means they're more likely to pass these recommendations. So I talked about the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So these are really the gold standard as to instructions on how to make websites accessible. But the guidance in there is very thorough, and it describes what the problems are, what the requirements are, and why those effects are. And they can be related to other kinds of software as well. It's not just about websites. You can apply that to desktop software and mobile software and so on. There's a checklist for testing against accessibility. And there's also, so the Web Accessibility Initiative also has a lot of useful resources for developers on how to get started making sure your work is accessible, and also some libraries and things that you can make use of. There are also various accessibility testing tools or guidelines for choosing different tools that you can test accessibility with. I won't go into great detail about any of these, but good places to look for guidance on how to do accessibility well and how to make things usable come from people like Microsoft, Apple, and Google, who have big development teams, and they've developed style guides and standards for those. Also, there's an accessibility blog on the UK government site, which has links to lots of really useful information and guidance, so that's really worth having a look at. Okay, so we're talking about universal usability. What do we mean by that? So the idea is that if we design if we do things usably for people with disabilities, then we're making things better for everybody else. So example of universal usability, an automatic door. So it doesn't matter what the situation is, this makes things better for everybody. So if you're blind, it makes your life easier. If you're pushing a pushchair, it makes your life easier. If you have mobility problems, you're in a wheelchair, it makes your life easier. So this designing usability, designing accessibility, it makes things better for everybody. Okay, so we'll look at some basics of usability. So the first thing to say about that is, particularly for developers, it's quite easy to make the assumption that your users have the same knowledge and experience that you do, that they understand how what you've developed works, and therefore they know clairvoyantly how to use it. And that's not actually the case. So you need to think about designing from the perspective of the user, not for yourself. Your users are not you. Okay, so one of the first sort of principles is affordance patterns and user flows. So we talked about we need to understand user goals. What is it that your users are trying to achieve, and how are they going to want to approach that? What's the steps that they want to do to take that? So an example here, we've got 6 different interfaces from 6 different travel apps from across the world. And they all have the same thing in common. So I'm trying to travel somewhere. What do I want to do? I want to pick where it is I am, and I want to pick where it is I'm going to. So there's a from and a to, or departure, and a destination, and they all have that same thing. So some of them are a little bit easier to see because there's less other things going on the screen. So for example, the Lumo one, from and to, where are you going? Nice invitation to tell you, what to do here. It makes it nice and clear. And the LNER one is a little bit more vague, and it has things that are relevant on there. So journey with us to the MOBO Awards, probably not what you want to be doing when you're trying to get your train to Nottingham. So it's important to think about what it is the user's trying to do, and make it as easy for them to see how to get to that thing that they want to do. And use familiar patterns. Don't invent some kind of new exciting way of doing something. Make it so that users know what to expect and how to do it. Okay, so use recognizable metaphors. So these are very simple examples. Everybody kind of knows what a calendar is and how that works. Everybody knows what a bookcase is and what a book is. So if you have an app that's for sharing books, then you have your books on the bookcase, click on the book and you can open it and read it. If you're looking for a compass, then something that works like a compass is nice and easy to understand. So these are slightly less easy to understand, but they are familiar. So it's useful to use things that are familiar. So the camera is relatively straightforward. So everybody knows that the save button is the floppy disk. Not everybody realizes that that's what it is, but they all know what it looks like. So to those of us that are a bit older, we know what a floppy disk is, and that means that's where you save your data to. For the younger generation, a lot of them think it's a garage or something like that. So it's the place you put your stuff, where all the junk lives. And the same thing with a padlock. So we know that it's a padlock, and it's so if you're doing your shopping, it's nice, safe, secure shopping. A lot of people don't realise it's a padlock and they think it's a nice fancy handbag. It doesn't really matter. People learn things. So there's recognisable metaphors, but there's also things that are familiar, things that people have already learned. Okay, you'd think that sort of weather symbols were fairly universal, but not necessarily the case. So this is quite an old one. I know it's been updated with a new one, but it's not exactly clear what's going on there. Okay, it's important to keep it simple. So this should be the tagline: usability, keep it simple. Users do not want to be overwhelmed with information. You're just going to, even if they do not have a cognitive issue, they're going to get very overwhelmed. If you give them too much information, they don't need it. Give them the information they want. And also, users don't want many controls. They don't want different ways of doing things. So I originally used the image of the airplane to talk about a piece of software that I previously worked on, where the user was given 240 different attributes they could set up for a particular object. When in reality, only 30 of those were actually something the user could set up, and only about 7 of them users actually cared about. So do not overwhelm your users with controls, things that they don't need. So another example here, this is actually a microwave I found in a rented house when I lived in Seattle. It has all of these different functions on the left. Including an appointment scheduler and a message taker and various other things, including a help button. And the help button was the most important. This is too much. If you're microwaving something, do you really need this amount of options? Or could we just have 2 little dials that set what heat I want it on and how long it's going to cook for? It's important to make choices visible and clear, particularly working in software. There's always time where you want the user to make a decision about something. So they're trying to do something and they need to know what's the best option. So good examples here on the left. Are you sure you want to delete this photo? So a nice question that describes what it is we're doing. And then the buttons are very clear about what we're going to do. Yes, delete it, or cancel. And then it's clear what needs to be done here. So we have other examples here. It's are you a beginner, not a beginner, giving you choices about where to start and helping you to find the right place to go. Other examples of giving some prompts to the user about what to do, good titling on the button so they know what to do. These kind of controls so the top right here where we've got the brightness control. So the slider, users know intuitively what to do with it. The switches, so nice physical metaphors are quite effective. And then the bottom one in the Amazon basket, we have different behavior depending on whether something is currently available or it's not. But the buttons and the options are clearly labeled about what to do. Okay, here's some examples of how not to do it. So the top left there, do you want to continue, abort, retry, ignore? It doesn't really give us any information about what the user's trying to do here, and those combination of buttons, not even the people that wrote the code have any idea what that's going to do for them, I don't think. Top right here, so there's a bit more information. Do you want to cancel the action? Click OK to cancel, or cancel to continue. So which of those is the right one to choose? Impossible to know. And the same thing with the warning on the bottom. So there's a bit more information. It's at least telling you what the consequences are of the action that you're going to do. Proceeding with the operation delete will erase the contents of your hard drive. What do you wish to do? But then you have proceed and delete. Who knows what to choose there? So it is, there are ways to do things badly. Okay, it's important to give feedback and meaningful messages. So there are kind of scales of usefulness of the feedback. So having the spinner at the top there, or the one underneath it, that says that your application is doing something. If somebody's using something and they click on something, they expect something to happen. If something doesn't happen and there's no feedback, then they will click the button again, or they will do things and cause unexpected effects. Also be mindful that users don't necessarily read things. Putting an OK button on a message isn't necessarily the best way of dealing with things, because users will ignore the words in there and they will keep clicking and clicking the OK button and going in circles until you actually stop to read it. I've seen somebody do that 7 times on one particular interface. So having the download bar here, the progress bar, is more helpful because it's giving some feedback about how long it's going to last. It is useful to be able to give some kind of estimate as to how long something is going to take. The bottom example here, it has kind of so it's a progress bar, but it also has stages. So each time the something has happened, the progress has met the next stage, then it highlights that that bit's been done. That's quite useful feedback. On the right here, it's a useful message. So it says what's gone wrong and it makes a suggestion about what the user should try to do next. Here's some examples of how not to provide feedback. So the top left, no message, just an OK button. The middle one, we have contradictory graphics and headings. We've got an error, but the operation completed successfully. It's a little bit confusing. Encountered an improper argument is not very informative. And the flight status there, so it's an accurate message, middleware returned invalid JSON string, but it isn't very helpful to anybody. The bottom left one there was a message that appeared if you were on the Lenovo site and you're comparing computers to buy and you only selected one of them. It's a very good idea not to put insults to the customers in the messages that you provide. Even if you're only doing it during testing, you have to remember to update it. Okay. There's lots of ways on interfaces to provide help where the user needs it. So you can give the user guidance by labeling things nicely, as we've said, putting meaningful descriptions onto buttons. You can also put in guidance about what should be put. So if you have a form and you have fields to fill in, it's useful to have some guidance about what's valid information to put in there, or what information you're trying to get at. There are also ways to put additional content in there to help users. So for example, the middle example there at the bottom, there's different options. Again, it's clear what to do and there's a good description about what those different options mean. So these examples are mobile ones where an overlay is a most effective way to give user help with using something to bring something up with the controls. On ordinary desktop software or a website, you can open a new page or open a new tab to give information there if you need to. But it's always ideal, if you can, without overwhelming the user, is to put in just tips and hints and good labels to help them know what to do. So how do we go about designing for usability? So a particularly useful technique, and one that's used a lot, is something called interaction design. I'll talk you through some of the processes involved in that. The first thing we want to do, as we said, we need to think about who are our users, what is it that they are trying to accomplish. So it can be useful to look at the different roles of users, and you might have different kinds of users. So you might have users that are your everyday users, but you might also have some users that are responsible for administration. So for example, with an electronic lab notebook, you might have your researchers on one scale of user. You might have supervisors who have different requirements, different things they're trying to accomplish. And then you might have administrators who are dealing with things like user accounts and setting up templates on the other side. So there are different kinds of roles, and it's useful to think about who those different people are. So with interaction design, common processes to go from creating personas which represent, so they're fictional cases that represent those different roles, and you go through a process of taking those personas, working out what it is that they're trying to do, what their needs are, and creating scenarios, creating storyboards for those where you kind of refine how they're going to interact with the tools or software that you're providing. And then you can go through that into prototyping. So I just describe what's going on the screen here in a little bit more detail. So in the top left here, what we're doing is we're starting with a persona. So we're thinking about a particular individual user and what their needs are. So in this particular set of examples here, we were looking at creating an application for reporting problems on the traffic system. So in that context, thinking about creating an app for that, we were looking at creating a persona. So who might be a user of this and why might they be doing it? So the persona is kind of taking this fictional person. So it's quite useful to have a picture of somebody so that you can identify with them, you name them, you give them a little bit of a background. Who are they? What is it they do? And then how is it that they're getting to interact with your particular tool? So in this example, we have Natalie, who's 27. She's a TV director in Chelsea, and she does a lot of traveling by public transport. Okay, so we have various thoughts about what are her concerns, what are her motivations, what's she doing, and we have things that she's worried, so she uses public transport, but quite often it's not the best experience and that she can be a little bit nervous about it. So think of a scenario that she's dealing with. So she's come to the train, she wants to use the toilet, but the toilet's been trashed by somebody, it's a mess. So then we look at that and sort of break it down into a story. So what happens when she sees this? What she wants to do? How is she going to interact with this particular application that we've created? So she's going to take a picture, she's going to want to report it to somebody, so she's going to send that picture, and then somebody will come and fix that problem for her. So taking that storyboard, which is the top right there, then we can go into the steps. So when she's doing this, what are the steps? What are the easiest ways for her to get to report this particular problem using the app? So we've created some task flows and some user decisions, and then we've created some paper prototypes here. So how is she going to get to do those things? And the various steps involved. So you can go quite easily before you've written a single line of code to actually thinking about what are the problems that we're trying to solve and how might a user interact with the tool that we're creating. So prototyping is a really useful part of the process. So once we've actually got the sort of story, how does it work, and the design ideas for the tool that we're producing, then we can create them as prototypes. And the easiest way of doing it, and certainly the cheapest way of doing that, is to actually create it on paper. So you can create it on paper, and that means you can take it to users or to other people to show them, get them to pretend to use the paper as though they were actually using the tool that you're creating. And then you can really easily, if there's a problem with it, if the flow doesn't work, doesn't make sense, you can easily change it, put in a new one and try it again. So testing is really important. Getting other people to look at what you're producing is a really important part of the process. So this doesn't have to be anything complicated. It can be as simple as I've created some design on paper, I'm going to get somebody to pretend to use it, or you can use things that are a little bit more interactive, a little bit nearer the final product. So example on the left here is way over the top, and as you can tell from the age of the equipment, it's rather old as well. So this is the IBM Hersley Usability Lab. So we have a two-way mirror there. And there were cameras and microphones, and what we would do is pop users into the other side of it with a computer and a telephone and get them to use software. And if they had a problem, they had to ring somebody on the telephone, and we'd walk them through it as though it was a service. This is very over the top, and actually it's incredibly intimidating for the users. One of the things with using software, and I'm sure everybody's had this experience, is that if something goes wrong, you can't work out how to do something, it makes you feel stupid, and that's not a good idea. So it's nice actually to get people in a quiet space, but to have one person running a session, one person as an observer, and get people to work to use the tool or the prototype, and to see, so set a goal, get them to do a thing that you want, a particular goal to accomplish, and to let them do the step by step. And it's important to reassure them that if something goes wrong, if they can't do something, it's not their fault. The other is to get them to talk out loud about what they're doing, what they're thinking, what they're expecting to happen, and to not interfere with them. So not give them the answers unless they get really stuck. So the idea is you want to find out what they can do on their own and how easy it is for them to do it, how many mistakes they make, and what they were expecting to happen most of all. It is also possible to do this over the internet, so you can do it remotely. So even if people you want to use this are in another country, you can do that. You can create mock-ups. So even a PowerPoint presentation with screenshots that people can work through and use works really well. Doing this kind of testing, you only actually need 4 or 5 people to do it to actually get really good, consistent results. So that will show you the big problems that there are that you can solve. And any more than that, you start to see kind of personal preferences creeping in, and it's really effective to do iteratively as well. So if you do tests with one person, you find that something went wrong, you can make a change, and then you can take it to the next person and see how far they get. So it works really well iteratively. And if you can do this sort of up front before you've done a whole lot of coding, that's even better. But even if you have a whole product that's already been developed, you can still go through this process and learn something. It's important to make sure that other people look at what you develop. So if you are a developer working on your own, get somebody else to look at it too. It's really hard to test your own work. It's very difficult. Okay, so trends and futures for universal usability. So technology is not static, as you know. It's always developing. There's always new things coming along. So at the moment, there's been quite big strides in assistive technologies over time. So now it's much more common to find tools on your phone or on your computer, various operating systems that allow you to interact better, particularly if you have impairments. So things like magnifiers, speech to text, and even screen reader kind of technologies, which were previously you'd have to sort of buy those. Now there's a lot more that actually comes with it. Also, alternative interaction methods are kind of getting better all the time. So talking about voice technology, obviously things like Alexa and Siri, they've got much better over time. And these are particularly important for people with disabilities to be able to have alternative ways that they can talk to the technology. It also helps with sort of situational impairments. So for example, in our Talk to Lab project in Southampton, we had voice technology in the lab that meant that the people in the lab could talk to that to get information and to control the instruments and things without needing to sort of touch the technology themselves. There are also various other interfaces. So there's been quite a lot of work with gestures, and particularly using kind of AI technologies that can look at pictures and to identify what motions people are using. So that provides another one. And there's also quite a lot more brain-computer interface, so particularly using EEGs that help people to control software. People who can't talk and have limited movement are able to use these to actually input into a computer and control them. So more technology is becoming more accessible to more people over time. And things like virtual and augmented realities give people other ways of working that are interesting. And it's important to think about how these different technologies, what the usability is for this, how you can make it easy for people to use them and not get overwhelmed by them. AI is obviously extremely important, and for the future of everything. So there are potential advantages for AI. So the fact that it can learn about how you work, it can adapt to you. That gives more opportunities to more people. A lot of the accessibility tools and the assistive technologies can make use of AI to do things better. And also the fact that you can interact with it using a natural language is particularly helpful for people with cognitive disabilities, because it reduces the complexity and difficulty of learning to interact with the computers. Rather than programming a computer, you can talk to the computer, and that's kind of good for all of us, really. There are definitely challenges, particularly in the way that businesses are working. So I talked about at the beginning that usability and graphic design are not the same thing. So although graphic design can help usability, I'm seeing a lot of cases of where the making things look pretty is interfering with the ability of actually making it easier for the users to understand them. So, for example, things like hidden scroll bars and hidden controls, things that look very slick on a design page, but actually when you come to use them, it means that it's much less obvious how you go about using them. In terms of the business versus the user, so there are a number of different things. So agile development, the concept that what we're going to do is to put something out there as quickly as possible, and not necessarily go through proper design processes on the way, and not necessarily have fully tested them or thought about what function might come along in the future and how that would slot in. So see sort of additional complexity being added to things where they don't need to be. Busy work is another thing. So this is what I mean by this is that a lot of the tech companies, for example, and it fits in with engagement traps as well. So there's a movement towards trying to get people sort of engaged and measuring things by how much time they spend doing something, likes, clicks, all of that kind of thing. And that means that there's a drive to keep adding new function. That means that a lot of applications are getting overwhelmed with content that users don't particularly want to have. And this sort of is fed in a little bit to the AI as well. So I will, for Sammy, have a slight rant on Outlook. So for example, this week, my Outlook apparently knows more about what my work is than I do, as well as sort of predictive text. It's now started completing whole sentences for me with completely nonsense, useless information. And it's something that I didn't ask for, but it's given it to me anyway, and now it's made my life harder. It's not making my life easier, because it's making assumptions and it doesn't know enough yet to know actually what it is I'm typing in this email, or what attachment. It's not an invoice I'm attaching, it's something else, for example. And there's also a problem of automatic A/B testing. So there's less hands-on sort of people who know usability, who've worked with people. So for example, the way that Facebook updates its interfaces, what it does is it programmatically, it will create there will be two different interfaces, and they will be sent out to 50% will see one interface, 50% will see another. And then depending on the outcomes of that, they will choose the interface. But that doesn't mean that those interface designs are actually better or making anyone's life easier. It doesn't mean they're more usable. And there's a lot more of that sort of automatic testing going on that's taking the user out of the loop, and the usability expert out of the loop as well. So there are worrying kind of trends in that things don't, despite the fact that there are a lot more usability experts, understanding is better, usability is not apparently getting better and is getting worse in some cases. Thank you very much. I appreciate that was probably quite rapid and quite a lot of content, but thanks for listening.
If you could give, I guess, one bit of key advice to someone about trying to make their website more usable, as that's one of the things we're doing for PSDI, obviously, we're developing websites. It's something I've done a lot of in the past, but also very much from I like the databases and the back end side of things. I try and leave the front part to somebody else, but What would that piece of advice be?
It would be know what is that's important to your users and make that thing front and center. So if you have a website, and there are all kinds of different websites, but assuming that you have a particular audience in mind, then what you want is when they come to you, is to make sure that what it is they've come for, they can find really easily. And the other thing is to make sure that it doesn't take forever to load.
So we do have a question from the audience as well. So do you feel that usability should be implemented to a greater degree in the reusable aspect of FAIR? So for anyone who doesn't know, FAIR stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, and thinking particularly about code.
So yes, usability. So usability across the whole of FAIR, I think, is very important. So I didn't talk about usability in code, but there are lots of ways that code can be made more usable, particularly in terms of, so documenting in the code is important. So sensible function names and parameter names, for example, that are actually descriptive. So they help somebody to understand what is it this function does, what is this variable in reality. So a variable that's named I and A and that sort of thing is not helpful to anybody, but something, you know, that's named you know, input and output, or even more descriptive than that. So if it's a particular sort of value from an instrument or a particular, you know, I'm not going to pretend I have any idea what the code might say, but yeah, so sensible naming within there, and also comments. So comments, particularly if there's something that's not obvious to read. So it's nice to have good formatting and white space where that's possible, so that it's readable in the first place. But then, yeah, so comments. So you don't necessarily have to comment absolutely everything. Ideally, you know, that it's with the names that will help make it sensible. But yeah, comments that explain it, particularly if it's something complex or something odd. And if there's something that's in there because it fixes a problem. So if there was another way of doing it, but this is the better way, then the comment describing why it's better. But yeah, so that people can understand what it is doing is the most important.
So the next question is, how do you improve usability for new users but keep the legacy, so 20+ years using that software, users happy as well?
Okay, so I mean, there are a couple of different strategies to doing that. So one of them is, so if you have complexity to, so I'm a really big fan of wizards, but there are ways of configuring things and parameters so that you have a kind of a basic tab and an advanced tab. So hiding things that are more complicated away in advance. So that's a sort of relatively simple level. Another way of doing it that is obviously a lot more complicated to implement, but is the idea of kind of profiles or perspectives, so that you actually ask the user or give the user options so that you can switch things off. So for the so this could be kind of layouts of things, so that for an advanced user, you change the layout such that things that are easy things that you're not going to use very often are hidden away, and the more complex things are there. But the original view was for the new user, so only the easy things were there and not the complicated parts. I've now lost my train of thought, and I did have another idea. Oh, it was progressive disclosure. So this is about help in the interface. So I talked about that you need to provide assistance to the user within the interface that gives them guidance on what they should do. Now, if you have lots of text there that explains things because you need it, that can be annoying if you're an experienced user because there's too much. But what you can do is kind of have that in a collapsible thing, or where there's more information. So you have like a question mark or an eye, and the user can click on that, and then it can give them more information. It expands. So the idea that there's a small amount of information, and then you can get more if you need it. So there are various strategies where you can hide information away, but get more information or more complexity if you want it.
What is your view on the Clippy, the Microsoft paper?
Microsoft Clippy. Okay, so this is coincidentally. Okay, so I have a little bit of a story. So it was Outlook that prompted this thought earlier on. So Outlook at the moment is trying to be too clever. It's putting information in there that doesn't belong in there. It's trying to finish my sentences, do my job for me. Now, this is quite similar to how some people felt that Clippy used to behave. So Microsoft Clippy, a little animated Clippy character, paperclip character in Microsoft Word back in the day, where it would go, it looks like you're writing a letter. And then it would go, can I format that for you into what looks like a letter? Now, whether anyone found that helpful, I'm not really sure. So I liked the little animated character. I thought he was fun. However, I was teaching at this point, and one of my students was a chap who had a very serious crash on a motorcycle and had a much more serious head injury than I got. And so he was doing really well. He lost a lot of his capability. He was very frustrated by it though. And he was doing computers, not something he'd done before. And he was writing probably letters and other things using Microsoft Word. And Clippy would pop up and say, it looks like you're doing this. Can I do that for you? And he found it extremely frustrating because in his view, this little animated Clippy was you know, partly trying to take control, but it was also judging him. You know, it was judging what he was doing, and he found it. He used to get very wound up about it. So yeah, so the sort of there's help and there's too much help, and the option to I don't want this, let me switch it off is really important.
Cool. So yes, thank you ever so much, Karis. That was really, really awesome. I really, really enjoyed that, and not just because of the Outlook round. So just to say, you know, we do have a lot of exciting events in the pipeline. So please do keep an eye on our website, our social media, and obviously sign up to the mailing list. You can get our latest event info hot off the press. And as ever, our webinar series will continue. There will be many more of these and lots more in-person and hybrid events as well. So thanks to everyone who's joined us today, and one more big thanks to Karis. I hope you will have a fantastic rest of the day and hope to see you all soon at another PSDI event.